In this workshop, everything that we have been talking about, tracking, prioritizing, weeding out, whether it's subjects or whether it's activities that we've been doing, and we've narrowed down the focus now. You should have several pieces of paper or calendar, notebook, your phone, whatever you do best at tracking. We need to see it. We need to start with numbers. We have to see what we have and where we can put homeschool in, which is why I never encourage you to start with the curriculum first, because we get the curriculum and then we think, oh, all of a sudden we're jumping to what the curriculum says to do. Oh, we have to do 5 days a week on this subject. And that's not the way to plan, because that's not how you want to start off your year. That's stressful. The curriculum has to bend to our family. That's the flexibility. That's organization. Yeah, you can still do it 5 times in a row, but does it all have to be within the same week if you decide to school 4 days for the week? So in this workshop, what we're going to do is we're going to have it all together head on. I'm going to bring it head on for you. So don't let me lose you, because I am going to talk about things that happen for the year, because it affects how we plan each week, things that we need to look at weekly, time zones, subjects, monthly, things that happen monthly. I'm going to tie it all together to give you a big picture, because now you've taken time to hopefully dive into this with everything you have, so we can make it a workable schedule. And then in addition, I share some of my schedules where I had more control over increments of hours, and other times when it was just in my head and I had no control and I had to go with what my schedulers were saying we had to do. So you'll see those types of schedules, but I want you to share. I want you to have a draft after this workshop or while I'm talking. See if you can fill it in and draft where you see the subjects. Remember, we're not to curriculum yet. I'll help you with that part. We're at the subjects. Where are you making room for homeschool? Where's we're trying to find the time, the slots. How are we going to make room for it? That's what you're doing right now. Okay, so we're meeting everything head on. Don't let me confuse you, because up until this time, I've kept everything pretty well on one topic. I'm not going to in this workshop, because now you need to see how does it all come together. All right, so first let me talk a little bit about schedules. What kind of schedule should you follow, or options that we have? Now again, most states have flexibility in choosing the schedule. Some, all they ask is that you just give them the beginning and the end date of your school year. So here's a couple of options that I have enjoyed through the years. And then, like I said, I was going to explain to you about year-round homeschooling. Now, when I first started homeschooling, I did a mistake like a lot of new homeschoolers, and that is I started at 8 o'clock and I thought I had to go to 3. Well, that was insane. We just did our numbers on the last workshop, and you can see that's the reason why we don't have to school as long. Several reasons. One thing, the work is very intense because it's one-to-one. We have a shorter amount of time to get it in if there's no interruptions, and we get it done and over with. Now, that's the formal part of the day. That doesn't mean that you only school till lunchtime and then the rest of the day's off, but it could mean that. It could mean that depending on your children's age, because if your children are younger, learning is playing, playing is learning. That is their work for the day, is playing. That's what they should be doing. If it's a teenager, older kids, they should have time pursuing passions that they enjoy, whether it's writing, photography, sports, music, whatever hobbies they enjoy. We had to convert the garage into a workout center because each son that came along had to get into physical fitness and working out, and I enjoyed all of that. We converted the garage into a workout center for my sons. They each wanted to get into that. That's fine. The rest of their day after they did their formal part was working out and diets and talking with each other about diets and the latest diet. So again, you will have to determine your household's needs. And what you want to get in first in the day, like I explained, are your core subjects, the skill subjects. First in your day, you want to get those in. And you can do this either by a 5-day schedule. And I did that for a long time. And then I realized I was going way too long. Like I mentioned earlier, I was going from 8 to 3. That wasn't going to work. My kids hardly got out of bed, and I could hardly have dad off to work and breakfast done. And I was bringing self-imposed stress. There was no need. My family didn't operate like that. It was much more realistic for me to start at 9. A lot of homeschoolers began in the morning, their homeschool day, about 9. Some of them even closer to 10. So that's a good rule of thumb for you. I did 5 days a week, and I started at 9 in the morning. By lunchtime, when you have a younger household, then you strive to get pretty good amount of the work done in before lunchtime. I'd rather not get up and do anything in the house, change the laundry, not do anything, and kind of get that done before noon. Because in the afternoon, then we would read or do projects, and I wanted a light afternoon before supper came. So I did 5 days. But the schedule that I did the longest and that I enjoyed the most was a 4-day-a-week schedule. And you'll hear different homeschoolers say what they like about that one day, that 5th day. Some of them use it to catch up on school, but most use it for field trips, catch up with the house, have an end of the week slow day. I didn't do that. I took off Monday. And this is why. Remember I told you a little bit about my personality. And I knew that it was stressing me to have the house that unkept. I just could not. So I changed it. My kids didn't really care. They were younger. They didn't care. Monday, Friday, whatever. It didn't really affect us. I took off Monday and had a slower start to the week. I had my meals prepped for the week. I'd done laundry that was important to get done. Not all of it. Remember I told you I had to give up an all-day laundry day. I did what was important. And when I mean important, I did my husband's dress clothes that had to have a lot of attention and care, and hung and pulled out of the dryer at the right time. See, I can even get very nitty-gritty about that. I did just those loads of clothes. Not my kids, not towels, not things that could wait. That could be done during the week while I'm homeschooling. If the dryer goes off and it's towels, guess what? It can be folded at the end of the day. Not a big deal. See, so I even analyzed, what do I need to do today? I need to have some time to rest too on Monday. I want my house clean. I want groceries in the house. I want to know what I'm doing for the week. And I lesson planned, and it made such a productive week for me. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I was on it. I was ready. I had their assignments laid out. It was beautiful. We had a busy weekend. My husband was off work. We had a busy weekend. And a slow start Monday was the best thing to get me in gear for the week. That was my best tip. Other homeschoolers, just opposite. They did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday it went around payday. That was for their errands. They wanted to finish their week up. They grocery shop. Maybe they would do a co-op on a Friday. That was their week then. Either taking off the Monday or taking off the Friday. 4 weeks through the whole year. And then, 4 days a week through the whole year. And then you just track where you're at. You don't really have to end right on the school year. When you got to 180 lessons, okay, there's your school year, it's done. It's that easy. Okay, some other curriculum has a schedule where they do 6-week studies and they have off 1 day. Now, if you have to follow a school calendar and it's more strict record keeping, that might be a good schedule for you. Because sometimes you don't get to take off as many days as someone in a relaxed state who will say, okay, well, I'm just taking off 3 days and then I just pick up where I'm at on the next lesson. So 6 weeks, and then 1 day off. Some families do it that way. But remember, we're not talking all day long. When I hear a homeschool mom that said, you know, we homeschool to 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night, you know, you should be, oh, but now I ask a lot more questions. Well, what time did you get started? Well, she didn't get started till 9 and that's your schedule. Okay, that's about right. You see, but she's still deciding what is best for her family. But if she started at 8 and they're still at 8 or 9, I do ask. But you know what? A lot of times there's huge interruption. Kids have needs. Mom may be sick. Dad may have come home for 2 or 3 hours in there because he's got different shift work. Are we going to say, no, we got to do work, we don't get to see dad? No. You stop, then you pick school back up. That's another scenario I had too in my life when my husband worked shift work. Okay, let me give you another sample of what we did. And this is when the kids were younger. I didn't really feel like I was making very much headway because, well, I just didn't feel that way, but it wasn't true. Again, when you have young kids, you just don't know, and you're so afraid that they're going to not make progress, and you worry. And I worry too, like young moms do, that I wasn't teaching my first one and have enough time with him because I was so, you know, I had these other kids to take care of and getting up at night with them, and I was tired. So what we did, and my husband suggested this, he's like, won't I take the younger kids on Saturday and I'll just take them in town? At that time, we lived out in the country. We lived out in the rurals. It was about a 30-minute drive into town. He's like, won't I take the younger kids? We'll just go in and get some donuts or some breakfast. We'll bring y'all back some. That gave me 2 hours alone each Saturday with my first son because I felt like I was getting behind with him. That was great. When he did that, I let Friday go, or I took off another day midweek. And having that short time with him, which was one-to-one and directed and predictable, we made leaps and bounds of progress, leaps and bounds that way. That's something else we did. Okay, so then let me just tie this point in with you here, because like I explained, I'm gonna go back and forth to things and tying them in and showing you these examples. When I created my lesson planner and the one I created for you, you notice that I have days 1 through 180. Not dates, days. Because that's the way life is. We can school day 1, day 2, day 3, maybe Wednesday. Then we don't school Thursday, Friday because kids get sick or one of those days off. We pick back up on Monday. That's our 4th day. We just pick up right there in the lesson planner and we go from there. That's how I want you to think, whether you're using a digital or whether you're using a printable lesson planner. That's how lesson planning is. It's not day 1 is Monday, day 2 is Tuesday, day 3 is Wednesday. And then even sometimes we even schooled on the weekend. And I count credit on the weekend because especially when my kids got to middle school and high school, they were doing activities on the weekend that I could count for their high school credit. So my days even changed from 5 and morphed from 5 of record keeping to 7. My lesson planner was fine because I have day 1, day 2, day 3. And I put the date for that day. I don't fill it in ahead of time and bring that stress on myself. I get my planner out. This is day 1. We're doing day 1. We're doing day 2. If we have 5 days in a row, we did 5 days. Don't bring self-imposed stress by thinking, okay, I need to date all of these. Because what happens eventually when you date them, when you sit down and you do have a lesson plan, you can see, you can track. And with the schedule that I also have, which I've had free on my site for years, and you can have every year after from here forward, is I showed you how to track weeks and days. Because what you want to do on this huge overview is, now I'm going to flip to talking about years now, is that when you plan, you also want to pull up and say, how many days do I want off for vacation? What holidays? Everyone celebrates different holidays. What holidays are important to your family? That's why you're homeschooling, to bend things to your schedule. Or my husband doesn't have off this holiday. He has off this time. Or we have a family reunion here. Or we're taking vacation here. Plan those too on the form that I have for, it's called year-round, but actually it's just the yearly schedule planner. It doesn't mean you have to do school year-round, but I want you to see and mark out weeks. That's what a teacher does when she gets ready to start her year. She knows these are the weeks or the days that I'm going to school. Then you just mark those weeks off and you track your days and your weeks on that form. And yes, I encourage you to print it and put it into your lesson planner. Then you can see, okay, we're taking these weeks off here, so I'm going to bump lesson plans up. We're going to try to get more done the week before, and we can do some the week after. Okay, so you're also weeding out the days that you're not going to school. Some people like to take more time off for the summer. Let me now explain about year-round homeschooling, because like I said, everything's meeting right here. And when I first started homeschooling, I didn't really have a full grasp of what year-round homeschooling was. And everyone kind of changes it to their meaning. But basically, it means you school year-round, but what it does not mean is that you don't take time off and that you're doing the same thing. Because there's no way anybody would like to keep that same pace, right? We all need to break or get away from it. Now, we also have two camps in the homeschool world that you have to understand. When I've homeschooled from the beginning, my kids didn't go to public school. They weren't influenced that we had to look forward only to holidays and to summer break. That was the only time we weren't going to do anything. They don't care. It didn't matter to them. When summertime came, we did swimming and barbecues, just like in wintertime we would go skiing and enjoy the snow. That's how they viewed it. They didn't really view summertime as, oh, I can't do no school. I've got to pull way away from it. It's the most wonderful thing to look forward to. They didn't, they don't, they still don't, because they weren't influenced by public school. Then you have people whose kids have been in public school. And then you mention to your middle school girl or son, and I think we're going to school year round. Oh, you see the eyes roll. And it's because from public school, summer is viewed a different way. Of course they love summer. It's the only time they weren't in school with this rigorous pace. So what you have to understand is you can decide if you want to keep to the school schedule. And here's the thing, I kept somewhat to the school schedule, but I took off a lot of time because we schooled year round. I knew we were going to be doing things in the summer because here in Texas, the heat is too much. It's too much to be out doing a bunch of fun things. On top of that, my kids love theme parks like anybody else, but it also was too hot. We would hit a couple of them, but mostly we would wait till it cooled off, which is spring and fall. So what we did was June, July, we actually hit school real hard because that's what we wanted to do. Because come October, November, that's right, we stopped school or we went to the park out in the fall weather, our camping, our nature walks, our nature drawing outside. So we hit our math harder in the summer. See, that's the choice you have. So don't think just because homeschoolers say it's year round, this is what seasoned veterans don't do. They don't do the same pace. They take off a lot more time in between, and they get a lot more subjects in, or sometimes they just exclusively, I've done this many years too, I exclusively devote 1 month to art or music or ballroom dance because my kids were interested in it. We didn't do anything else. It's a great time also to discover passions and to bring learning and to bring fun into your homeschool for those summer months. But again, you have to think about this. Does it work good with your schedule? I know in my past workshops that I have been doing for 10 years, I had several public school teachers that were homeschool moms now. Well, their husband was still a teacher at the school. So it was just good for them to stay to the August to May or June schedule because dad would be off in the summer. That's fine. But what I want you to understand about year-round homeschooling is that you can make it anything you want to make it. It's up to you. And I enjoy a year-round schedule. It wasn't until we got closer to the high school years, the last couple actually, that I switched to just the summer because I knew college and careers were around the corner. So I wanted to get in from August to May, everything else they needed. I tracked that way, but we still did things in the summer. We still explored passions that they enjoyed in the summer. I didn't have to completely give it up. I just tracked by the year, but we did way more. That didn't even go on the transcript. It's a wonderful pace. But, always do the buts. Hear my heart. If you're not the kind of person that can do that, and you say, there is no way I want to step completely away, then step completely away. But does it have to be summer unless you want it to be? You take control. You decide what is best, but do decide. Have a beginning and say, this is our end. And then take that yearly schedule that I have that I said was free on my website, Tina's Dynamic Homeschool Plus, and highlight which weeks you're not going to, this is vacation, this holidays, family reunion, anniversary, whatever you have, mark those out so you can actually see how many weeks you have to school. Okay. So I talked about a 4-week schedule. I talked about a 5-week schedule. I talked about, 4-day schedule, 5-day schedule. I even talked about schooling on Saturday. You could even have a 6-day schedule. And when all my kids were high school, we had a 7-day schedule. No, I wasn't tracking all of it. They were tracking, I was tracking part of it, but it was a 7-day schedule because they were doing their 3 R's during the week, and on the weekend, a lot of extracurricular activities that they enjoyed doing and passions that they were pursuing. So at that time, it was a 7-day week. That is not what you want to do if your household is young. If you have a young household, when I mean young household, that means your oldest is maybe 7 or 8. You have to have breaks in between there. Again, a realistic time to begin school, if you're going to do it in the morning, is between 9 and 10. The sooner the better. As soon as you get everyone fed, you can settle down and get to school. That is the time that you want to begin. Remember my next tip, try to get as much done when you have young kids that you can by lunchtime. I also took a 2-hour lunchtime because it took me that long to prep food for everybody. But also, I caught up on some of the laundry, phone calls, and I would hit a bill or two because I knew in the afternoon it was just going to be science or history, which was easier than the phonics, reading, math, and writing that we were doing in the morning. Okay, let me talk a little bit now about subjects. Let's talk about how to cover subjects. Let's talk about an older child too, middle, high school. For middle or high school, as long as they were motivated, I didn't really mind what time they got started. And also something I've confessed before, and I've shared this before in a previous workshop, is that I was quite judgmental when kids slept in that were teenagers until I had them. And then I realized they need a lot of sleep. They're still growing, they're still changing. And they were much better to be around when they started their work later. So they could take their work, and I didn't care where they did it in the house. Sometimes they would stay at the table with me when I had the younger kids. Sometimes he would go to his room. Sometimes he would sit in the living room. I didn't really care. He pretty well started when he wanted to because we had a checklist. When he was younger, I had all of them actually. I had a tower of drawers. Each child had a tower. I'll have a picture of that too. And like I said, I had their schedule, and in the drawers, I had the order of their subjects to be done. This is when I was transferring independence to them and not all on my shoulders, not all spoon feeding them. You can't expect them to be away from you and make good decisions if they can't make decisions on the order of their curriculum. So I would sit down with them what subjects they wanted to do. Now, I will share this with you. You do want to tackle the harder subjects in the morning. if you can. Sometimes kids need a little bit longer to wake up, and they may want to do a little bit of reading or piano and then hit a hard subject. That's good too. But you don't want to make it the last of the day because they don't like it. They really need the hardest subjects first. So I would sit down with each child and see what they wanted to do. And I knew one that he wrestled with math, but he needed to do it right away. So math was first. And then in each drawer, I put the books and help them to make sure each drawer had all the supplies that they need to get started for the day, whether it was their earbuds, pen, a math device. There's no running around looking for everything. I taught each one of them to keep all the subjects and the things that they needed for each subject in that drawer. I've color-coded binders for years. I've put my lesson manuals, I've taken them out of binders, and I've done coil bind with them. I've also put them in 3-ring binders so that I can flip through them easier. That's something else that I have done. But what I was explaining to you was that I put each one of their subjects, and as they got older, they enjoyed that. That actually went all the way through to high school with my kids. I have one son that is very organized, and I have another one that struggles with organization. So I had to help him. I had to get a system for him that was simple, that he could actually keep up with. And he liked the file folder system. I just bought him a clear organizer. I numbered the days because he had certain days he wanted to do school, and he was trying to work and do some volunteer work and doing stuff on the weekend. So at that time, he was doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at home. So I had folders in each one of those days, and then he would stick information to remember because he couldn't remember. He would forget or be scattered. Again, create a system. Create a system. If they're scattered, have a place. That's what organization is. Have a place to put that so they can see it. When you take time to set up your school like this in the beginning, it runs so much more smoother when everyone has clear expectations and you adjust a system to them. So for middle school, my one son appreciated having this little clear bin that was his, and he could put his work in. I could put work in there or put things in there if I try to remember, okay, you need to do this or do this, or remind him about this, and he was able to use that system. My other son was very good at keeping a daily planner. He preferred to write his out, what he was doing, and he kept up with it that way. I didn't need to pull his resources and put them together in a binder for him. He was able to pull them and prep for the week and say, okay, this is what I'm doing for the week. And he was able to do that. But I can tell you this, from the time that they were young, from the time all of my children were young, I had a place for them to store their paper when they were in at the end of the day. They knew exactly where to put away their books, their pens, anything, rulers, anything else that need to be put away for the day. They had a place to put it away. Even if it's a bin, because I explained to you that I also lived in an 800 square foot log cabin. That was an adventure with a family of 5. But I made sure before we moved in that I had those big tall beds that stood up off the floor so that I could use all the floor space. And we had bins underneath their own wheels. And we just pulled them out, and each child had their own little square tub underneath there and had their books laid out in there. No, I didn't get to organize them by subject, but they also were younger. So everything was in the bin. They could pull it out, and it taught them, you go get your books. You go get organized. You go start your day. And this is what we're trying to do when we create the schedule. Okay, so some high schoolers are self-motivated. They're naturally structured. You can work their system. They don't have to bend to yours. Some aren't. You think of ideas to help them with the system. Also, I use those little O-rings, and I would flip the pages. I'd have their chores on there. I'd have their schedule. It was very clear what I expected of them each year or each day. They didn't think, oh, what am I doing? They could just mark it off and see where they're going. They loved it because it was so empowering to be so independent. And they loved it, and they knew exactly what to do for each day. Okay, so let's talk some. I want to get back to talking a little bit about covering the subjects, because remember I said it's all coming together here. I want you to pencil it in your grid view, because then next we're going to pencil in, and we're going to talk about curriculum, how to get that in there. It's important to understand that skill subjects, or our core subjects, have to be covered more. You have the workshop where I taught you where I explain and give you the big picture of the subjects that need to really, or that are important to teach each grade to be sure they really grasp the basics of language arts and math. So when you're planning for the week, what we don't want to do, it's better to give this to you in examples. What we don't want to do is, say we have a 4-day week and we plan history, science, and there's 2 days of math in there for a child that's 3rd grade. Now, unless the child is advanced or gifted and can do those things, that's not balanced. That's not focusing on what is important. Now, we can have history, science, but they're not first thing in the morning. Those subjects we can do in the afternoon. So the morning needs to be filled with the 3 R's. That's what we hit first. And yes, they may not like to write, but again, remember my tip. We can marry writing with science. See, and then we even have science in for the day. They can do something else in the afternoon, like independent reading. So that's why I say sometimes it's hard to use a box curriculum, because box curriculum just keeps subjects so separate, when actually that's not how learning is. Learning is all connected. All bodies of knowledge we want to see the connection to the big picture. So we can learn about math, we can do some math problems, and we can read a math book. Okay, so if there's a writing, we can do the science. Until 4th grade. Remember, by 4th or 5th grade, that's where the content subjects shift to the front. That's how your planning is. So it depends on the ages of your children. So that's why I'm giving you these guidelines, so that as I'm speaking, you can say, okay, well, my kids are these ages or these ages. So, well, my kid's only 4, my kid's only kindergarten. Okay, you have phonics, you have language arts, and math. That's it for the day. Now, that's not all you're going to do. You can plug in history, you can plug in science, but if that's what you're going to do first in the morning, that's what you're going to get in every day. It's not until about 4th grade that you can say, all right, well, maybe we can pull up and just do math. And it just really depends too on how they struggle. And I never did this, but some people, and even with my guy that was good at math, they would just pull up and say, okay, we're going to do math 3 days. Math is so fundamental. I can't, easy for me to say. It's so essential. It's so essential that there is no way that I was just going to have them do math for 3 days. We did math every day. But what we didn't do was long lessons all the time, short, because it kept them on their feet, so to speak, when it came to numbers, or even writing. It's much better to write every day than it is to go and say, okay, well, writing's only going to be 1 or 2 days a week. Well, you can do writing 1 or 2 days a week if you're writing the rest of the days about something else. Are you writing about science on a day that you officially did not assign composition? Then you're covering writing and history, or writing and geography, or writing and art. Or if you're doing art for a young child, okay, good. Art, then maybe you don't need the motor skills lessons to go for that day for a young child. Because the problem with a lot of new homeschoolers is sometimes they just don't know how many times a subject needs to be covered. So let me give you this next tip. A lot of curriculum providers, which is the next step you're going to do, you're going to open up your curriculum and you want to flip through it. If you've already chosen, if you haven't, that's still okay. You still got time. There's no rush, because they will say, this is better learned every day for 15 minutes. Or you need to do this twice a week. So you're going to have another map, another overview of each child's curriculum and what it's telling you, or recommending for you to cover for the week. But you just remember, that's not where you start, because that is bending to the curriculum, making the curriculum our master instead of our slave. That's not where you need to start. You need to start with the time that you have in the week. You'll do lesson 1 on day 1. You'll do lesson 2 on day 2. You'll do lesson 3 on day 5. See, that's how it works. You'll plug that in. So you're plugging in the subjects. So the next you'll look at the curriculum. The curriculum is a guide. Grammar usually every day for about 5 or 10 minutes. We don't need any more than that in the older grades. Composition, it's going to take a little bit longer. When they're learning composition, 40 to 45 minutes. Math, no more than an hour for any grade, all the way through into high school. No more than an hour. Any more than that, I found out that it's defeating. A child gets frustrated because they're trying to get it. It's time to just pull back, wait till another day, get a fresh start. Okay, so I want to help you with that too. What curriculum do you have? What is it saying that, what's it recommending in the front about how many days you do it, for how long? That's also going to be a guide to help you. That's another tip to help you for how many times that subject needs to be considered for the day. So my overall tip in teaching young kids is to begin with the skill subjects, get them in by lunch, save the content subjects, history and science, for the afternoon. They're easier to do and everyone's more relaxed. Plus, you can move into the kitchen and use that as your science lab. You can spread all your materials out on the floor for history. If you have a middle or high school child, then they're going to begin with the content subjects first. They can begin with history, geography. They can fold math in there, unless you can recommend to them. And I've had to do this before with my son that wasn't good at spelling. I'm like, I know you want to hit the science first because you're interested in it, but just do about 20 minutes of spelling. He's the one I told you about that we kept spelling formally as a subject until high school. And then another son, another 1 or 2 of them, we stopped at middle school because they were good spellers. We just held them accountable for spelling, but formal spelling lessons stayed with this one until high school. So I had to sit down with him and say, okay, help him to understand what he's weak at. We don't do him any favors by saying, oh, you're just the best child ever. We don't do him any favors. That's not how they get confident. They get confident by realizing they struggle with this, but they've got this and they can do it. So I helped him to see, I know you want to start and you're interested in doing this science lesson right now, but we need about 20 minutes of spelling. And he was very reasonable. Okay, yeah, you're right, Mom. Let me do that because I struggle with that. Let me get it out of the way. I'm like, that's right, let's get it. But you need it every day. See, so you want to go through each subject, look in the front, see how long it's recommending. But usually the content subjects, history, geography, art, all of those are saved until after lunch. Okay, one more tip I'm going to share with you before I stop this workshop, and that is another mistake I made, and I don't want you to do this, and that is I got so focused on the skill subjects that we never got in history or science. We never got it in. That's not fun. Kids don't like that, and especially young kids who are focused on the 3 R's. They really need those fun subjects to bring learning alive, because their writing, they're learning to read, their math, everything is these skill subjects that are so hard for them to learn right now. So I encourage you to make time for those other subjects that they have to do. And sometimes, this is what I even had to do several times during the week. I would say, and this was hard for me to do because I'm very much a scheduled person. I stuck to that schedule, but I realized I was drowning my kids. They weren't enjoying it. I wasn't enjoying it. We weren't doing some of the fun things that I wanted to get to. So I would just stop, and I ended up doing this schedule, which I really enjoyed, and that was the last schedule I wanted to tell you about too. I've done some other schedules, and I haven't written down here. I'm going to show you too on samples, but this one too I really enjoyed. And I did skill subjects Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I really loved doing that. That was it. Now what I would do Thursday and Friday, when I did 5 days, is that they would do their math, and I cut the math back to half the math lessons. I would require a journal entry of just a few sentences, and then we were able to get started on our science for the day. And we did science all day long on Thursday, and we did history all day long on Friday. Thoroughly enjoyed that schedule when my kids were young. And I'll tell you why too, because when we got ready to do science, it required getting a lot of household products out, spreading it out. All the kids were everywhere. And I thought, okay, we'll just do this and go all day long with it. We could literally start it, and then we would stop at lunchtime, and then we would pick up after lunchtime. I didn't have to put it away. And then when we put it away, guess what? It was away for the day and for the week. But here's the key. We would do 2 or 3 different activities within that one day. It was absolutely wonderful. It kept me from being stressed out because I didn't have to do science every day, because I was taking care of a newborn, toddler. I had young kids. I was outnumbered. I loved that. See, less was more. I thought, okay, how can I do this? Do I have to really do it every day? Nope. We did basically our science in that one day, and my kids loved it. We took breaks when we wanted to, but I had the mess. It was all over the house, and it was there for one day. We did the same thing for history. The next day was a history day. We would make maps because I wanted to do those things. I wanted to make salt dough maps. I wanted to make edible things for them to eat. I wanted to make crafts. I wanted them to enjoy. I wanted them to read. I wanted them to dress up for history. I wanted it to come alive. We wanted to grow things in our science. And we weren't doing that. We were just so focused. We just kind of got lopsided. And we were so focused on those skill subjects that we weren't having fun. So for me, it worked out better to hone all my effort on one day, and I could plan. I could plan on Monday. I knew what we were doing for science Thursday and Friday, and I got everything I needed at the store on Monday, because remember I told you sometimes I take off Monday? And that was where I was transitioning from a 5-day-a-week to the 4-day-a-week. And so I would do school, and I still would go afterwards and go grocery shopping. And then I eventually transformed to the 4-a-day-week schedule. But in the beginning, I didn't do that because I was still learning. So, and it didn't take long to school the kids because they were young. So by noon, I was done. So I could still get a little bit of grocery shopping in, and I would get everything on Monday, and I'd have it for Thursday and Friday. Prepped way ahead of time. Had everything they need. There's nothing worse than starting a science activity and not having anything you need, and the kids like, oh, Mom. And I've done that before too. So I knew what we were doing in science. I knew what we were doing in history, and it was wonderful. Okay, so those are just a few more tips that I wanted to share with you about the schedule, the year, marking out, weeding out, also the weeks, how to look at a 4-day, a 5-day, 6-day, 7-day. For my older kids, they were also tracking a little bit about how to organize it. We used color-coded binders when they were young. I used color-coded folders when they were young, O-rings, laminated. Yes, I was one of those laminate mothers because it worked out great. I could print the schedule for the year, laminate it. Each child had their own schedule, and I had a master schedule where I could see what we all were supposed to be doing at one time. I had that as well in the samples. So at this point, I want to see your schedules. What have you come up with? And if you've already chosen curriculum, I've given you the tip, look through it. What does it suggest for scheduling? Most all of them will tell you, we suggest so many minutes, so many days. And how many lessons does it have? Because if you're following 180 and say it only has 160, you see you've got some room for play in there. Maybe you don't have to, if they say 3 times a week, maybe you only want to cover it twice a week. And I will help you with whatever ages your children are to the subjects that they need to cover, how many times they should be covering that subject for each week, okay?